Hello guys, why did Russia attack Ukraine? Maybe Putin wanted to protect Russians from the Ukrainian invasion or from the American invasion, or they knew that NATO wants to occupy Moscow or aliens plan to destroy St. Petersburg. I still get questions like that below some of my videos, and I kept ignoring them because, come on, you can literally watch Russian atrocities online. This is a very unique experience of this war in the 21st century when you can see anything in the trenches after Russian attacks. But after Donald Trump started repeating Russian propaganda messages that often inside the White House, I felt worried for millions of those who somehow manage to remain neutral and can shape their opinion based on what they hear from the center of democracy, the United States, forgetting that right now it simply echoes the messages from the Kremlin. And also, I want to answer this question, why did Russia attack Ukraine? Because many good people keep thinking, keep hoping, choose to believe that it is just one person to blame. I'm going to show you a piece of art that I keep at home, made by a very famous Ukrainian artist, sociopath. But unfortunately, it is not Putin's war. Don't use this term because you will make me very angry and also millions of my fellow men. Why? First of all, because in every Russian tank, in every Russian bomber that drops bombs on Ukrainian houses when children are sleeping there, are Russian soldiers. There are hundreds of thousands of them killing us, raping us, looting our homes. This is not Putin in every of that bombers or tanks. They have made their choice. Please notice this great difference between the Ukrainian soldiers who don't have a choice. They defend our motherland. They defend our houses, our schools, our hospitals, our language, our future. If we stop defending ourselves, Ukraine disappears. And Russian soldiers have a choice. They sign this contract with the devil and cross the border of the free country. They see everything they do to us. They see that no one in Ukraine wants to join Russia, but they keep coming for money because of the evil that lives inside them. They have this choice. They sign contracts. They do it consciously. I understand why you want to think that this is Putin's war. It's much easier to defeat one person or 100 of people around Putin. And we are all lost when we think, what can we do with millions and millions and millions of Russians who truly, genuinely support Putin? If someone asks me, why did Russia attack Ukraine? I can ask more questions. Why do Russians love, adore, worship Stalin? Why do they carry his portraits everywhere? Why is it okay for Putin to quote Stalin? Stalin is responsible for the deaths of millions. And okay, forget about Ukrainians. They don't care about Ukrainian lives. But he is responsible for the deaths of millions of Russians. His crimes are known. Why do they still like him? And by the way, a question to all of us. Why did the world, why did Europe, why did the United States accepted that, closed the eyes on that when Russians began carrying Stalin's portraits on victory parades? Can you imagine Germans doing that with Hitler? And Soviet regime is responsible for a lot of crimes against humanity. Why don't they talk about that? Why don't they condemn it? A big question, but definitely closely connected with the reason why did Russia attack Ukraine. Another question I can ask those people: why do Russians accept that they have one president during this 25, 30 years already? This short spell of Medvedev was totally fake, it's quite obvious. Why do they accept it? Trump said Zelensky is a dictator. Ukrainians do not nourish dictators. That is not a part of our national character. Let's count the number of presidents Russia had and compare it to the number of presidents we have in Ukraine. So they had Yeltsin for a very brief period that decided to give power to Putin, and that happened quite unexpectedly and not very legally. That was the way to give power to Putin and to strengthen him before any elections take place. Then Putin and a short spell of Medvedev. 3 in total. In Belarus, for example, we have just one, Lukashenko. Let's count the Ukrainian presidents. I remember the very first one, Leonid Kravchuk. After that, we had Leonid Kuchma. After Leonid Kuchma, we had Viktor Yushchenko. After Viktor Yushchenko, we had Viktor Yanukovych. After Viktor Yanukovych, we had Petro Poroshenko. And after Petro Poroshenko, we have Volodymyr Zelensky. 6 versus 2 in Russia. What are we talking about? Why is it okay for the generations of Russians to be born when Putin is a president, to go to school, Putin is a president, to graduate from the university, Putin is a president, to get married, Putin is a president, and to die somewhere in his mid-grinders while Putin is still a president? Can you imagine that? Why don't they protest? Well, because Russians are very different from us. And I think the worst thing we can do is try and understand their mindset, because they demonstrate it's just pure violence and aggression towards neighbors. Russia attacked Chechnya and destroyed Chechnya to a great extent. Russia annexed part of Moldova. Russia started war against Georgia and created quasi-republics there. Russia annexed Belarus, and Russia attacked Ukraine. Why? Is it Ukraine to blame, or NATO? Or maybe we should focus on Russia and not look for the ways to escape from the reality. You know, right now, Trumps keep talking about the need to recognize Crimea as Russian territory officially, internationally, and that will bring the solution to the conflict. That is so stupid. Because if you listen to what Putin says, what Peskov says, what Dugin says, you clearly see that the reason for Russian war against Ukraine is they don't want Ukraine to exist. They deny the existence of my largest in Europe country. They deny the existence of the country they recognized in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. They deny the existence of the country they wanted to destroy during the last 300 years. Actually, during Soviet times, they celebrated this occupation of Ukraine, naming this day the day of reunification of Russia and Ukraine, forgetting that right now they want to spread another BS saying that Lenin invented Ukraine. I have a question to this very Negligent Russian propagandists. If Lenin, according to you, invented Ukraine, then why did you celebrate 300 years of the unification between Ukraine and Russia during all the Soviet times? Maybe because they want to steal our history, they want to steal our heritage. They say that Kiev is the mother of the Rus cities. And at the same time, they keep bombing this city. And they know that the imperial myth, the myth of the Russian strengths, of the Russian history, is impossible without Ukraine being a part of this Frankenstein. You know, I love comparing Soviet Union, Russian Empire, and modern Russian Federation to a Frankenstein. This depicts it very beautifully. Russia, modern Russian Federation, consists of hundreds of various cultures and nations that Russia suppresses. They don't respect diversity, they don't respect linguistic or cultural heritage. They name all of them Russians, they do not let them learn the language of their nation, they deny the existence of their histories and so on. And it is all very unnatural. They are too different. They do not go in line with Ruski Mir doctrine, you know, this orthodoxy, because there are lots of Muslims, there are lots of Buddhists, especially in the far east of Russia. They have totally different social ties, family traditions, and Putin sends them to war, by the way, right now, solving another problem of his Ruski Mir doctrine, which is awful. So they built the myth of the Russian Empire on the Ukrainian history, stealing the Kiev Rus heritage and pretending that they are the heirs, when in reality they were on the periphery of once the largest medieval state in Europe and slowly assimilated with lots of Mongolian, lots of very different tribes, setting violence in the center of their management system. What we observe right now is the agony of the empire. And it will die because empires do not survive in the 21st century. And Putin knows that he needs to recreate this Frankenstein that is already rotting in different parts. And Ukraine is central to this concept. By the way, those of you who follow his philosophers, his ideologists, know they actually say that Russian empire, Russian dream is impossible without Ukraine. Why is it so that Ukrainian dream is very much possible without Russia? To some extent right now is based on the absence of Russia and some big ocean to the east of us. If they are so successful, if they are so big and so strong, why on earth they need Ukraine? Because NATO will attack them? Let me know in the comments below, do you believe that NATO could ever attack Russia? Because personally, I am worried that NATO cannot protect itself when needed. Not saying it was prepared to suppress Russia in any way. Russia kept breaking international law in 2008, invading Georgia. By the way, there are lots of videos where Putin, at the start of his career, speaks about the need to respect the borders. He says that, of course, Crimea is Ukrainian, it belongs to Ukraine. If we start reshaping the borders, we will get into the Third World War. 20 years later, after he lost his mind, he says the country. And by the way, I don't know why so few people actually talk about this tremendous change in his consciousness. Maybe he is not okay at all? How can you negotiate anything with a person that changes his opinion like 180 degrees. In his very first interviews, Putin talks about the need to integrate with Europe and potentially join Nato. And later he started spreading this BS that NATO was prepared to attack. Anyone who repeats this message, especially living in the United States or in the NATO countries, is a traitor to his country. With all the efforts of the Russian propaganda, they did not manage to disclose any biolabs here. Unfortunately, people who shed that BS are now among the ruling elite in the United States. And I feel really bad about that, because what we observe right now is not just this constant Russian violence online, but also constant American madness online. Once again, I separate the people of the United States and those who kind of like the actions of Trump and how he serves Russia. Russia attacked Ukraine because it wants to recreate its imperial past, because it is a loser country, a very unhappy country that is not competitive on the market. They do not produce cars you want to buy. They do not invent telephones you want to get. They do not create new space programs. They use old things from the Soviet Union. By the way, a lot of the Soviet inventions were made by Ukrainians. And they need the potential of our people, the potential of our lands that are so fertile. And without that, it will start collapsing. It has already started collapsing. A lot of their internal problems they explain with the help of this foreign interventions, enemies everywhere. Russia is the largest country in the world. They don't need new territories. You cannot even imagine how many territories they have inside Russia, totally poor, totally uninhabited. They cannot encourage people to come and live there. Nobody wants. Nobody wants. Even those toxic trolls that keep spreading Russian propaganda for Russian money somewhere in California or, I don't know, in Austria, they somehow don't want to move and enjoy the Russian countryside. Why, I wonder? Keep asking them when they tell you how good Russia is. They have this chance to move and enjoy it to the fullest. But on contrary, Russia wants to spread itself further and further. And no, they will never stop if they are not stopped militarily, with very decisive actions taken. And Ukrainians are prepared to do the job. When someone asks you, why did Russia attack Ukraine? Ask them a question. Do you really think that NATO was preparing to attack Moscow? And also remind them of old imperial projects that have already collapsed and Russia desperately wants to survive in the 21st century. By the way, one more reason is this total control that they want to preserve over the very depoliticized, very weak population. That is a solution to many of Putin's trouble and the way to control the serfs. And one more reason is that no one from outside has ever tried to work with the Russian population. Germany changed tremendously after 1945, and that was a joint effort of the democratic countries that taught the people, once poisoned with very dangerous propaganda, what the consequences of it was, that showed them the crimes, that spoke about that. And now no one in Germany will say something positive about this period, 1933, 1945. In Russia, it is just the country. They want to return to these bloody years of Stalin. They love Putin because Putin resembles them, Stalin, greatly. And they want to keep him forever. What is wrong with these people? Russia is like a kaleidoscope of BS. And I know it does not sound poetic, but that's exactly like different kind of bullshit that appear in front of your eyes when you look at this Russian Federation. And you will find communists marching with the icons of Stalin to the church to commemorate the executed by the communist Tsar Nicholas II. And you will see Putin speaking about the Ruski Mir and Russian Orthodox Church doctrine and a sacred war and send Muslim Chechen fighters to control Russian soldiers and execute them if they don't follow the orders. A kaleidoscope of BS. Honestly, nothing else. So, what is the way out? The way out is not to think that it's Putin's war, Putin is to blame. Unfortunately, if the country is run by a dictator, it is not just a dictator to blame. And if the country keeps nourishing dictators like every 20, 30 years, there is something very bad inside their culture. By the way, another reason not to speak about the great Russian culture. First of all, the majority of the topics you discuss, even if you talk about that, is from the 19th, 18th century. Give me something from the 21st. You won't. Second, because the culture is successful when it produces adequate, positive, human-loving, human-respecting people. Like the culture is like school. It prepares you for your life, the way you will interact with other cultures, with other people. Can you say that Russia succeeded in that? Let me know everything that you think about the topic and answer the question. So why did Russia attack Ukraine? Thank you so much for the ideas that you provide in the comments below, for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel. Remember to subscribe to my social media. The links are in the description of this video. And thank you so much for making this community of people who respect each other, who stand for freedom, who still remember what democracy is, what respect is, that we have this new amazing community. Slava Ukraini!